The rain poured relentlessly, drumming on the roof of Gerald Whitman's sleek black limousine as it sped toward the airport. The tycoon, worth billions and known for his ruthless business acumen, barely glanced out of the tinted window at the gray world outside. To him, the rain was just another obstacle, a minor inconvenience, delaying his flight to a luxury retreat. As the car halted at a red light near a crumbling intersection, Gerald's attention was drawn to a figure huddled on the sidewalk. A woman soaked to the bone clutched a bundle wrapped in a tattered blanket. She sat on the curb, trembling as the downpour soaked her frail frame. Beside her was a cardboard sign, its letters bleeding in the rain. "Homeless. Baby needs help." Gerald usually avoided such sights, telling himself it wasn't his responsibility. He had built his empire from scratch. Others could do the same if they tried hard enough. But this time, something gnawed at him. The woman's face, worn and etched with despair, reminded him of someone. He couldn't place it, but it stirred an unease he couldn't shake. "Stop the car," he ordered, his voice cutting through the silence inside the vehicle. His driver, Mark, looked puzzled but obeyed, pulling over to the side of the road. Gerald stepped out, the rain immediately soaking his tailored suit. He approached the woman cautiously. She looked up, her hollow eyes locking with his. "Do you need help?" Gerald asked, his voice unusually soft. The woman hesitated, clutching the bundle tighter, as if shielding it from an unseen danger. I don't want trouble," she whispered. Her voice cracked with exhaustion, and her chapped lips trembled. "I just need a little money for my baby. She hasn't eaten in 2 days." Gerald knelt down, the cold rain seeping into his bones. He peeked at the baby, a tiny, fragile thing with a pale face and eyes barely open. It wasn't just hunger. The baby was sick. "Where's the father?" Gerald asked, his business mind still searching for logic. The woman's face crumpled. "He left when he found out I was pregnant," she said, barely audible. Something inside Gerald shifted. He thought of his own mother, a single parent who had struggled to raise him in the slums before her untimely death. He thought of how his success had consumed him, how he had stopped caring about anyone else along the way. Without another word, he reached into his pocket, pulling out the keys to his city penthouse. "Take these," he said, placing them in her trembling hands. "The address is on the keychain. There's food, warmth, and everything you need. Just take care of yourselves." The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. Why would you do this for me?" "Because," Gerald said, standing up, "someone once helped me when I had nothing. Consider it paying it forward." As he walked back to the car, his heart felt lighter than it had in years. But Gerald had no idea that this act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. Gerald spent the next 2 weeks in the Swiss Alps, far from the chaos of his usual routine. Business meetings filled his days, while lavish dinners and high society parties consumed his evenings. Yet, despite the breathtaking views and opulence surrounding him, he found himself distracted. The image of the woman and her baby haunted him, especially in quiet moments. Questions churned in his mind. Had she made it to the penthouse? Was the baby okay? Was his impulsive act of kindness enough? Finally, unable to ignore the nagging unease, Gerald cut his trip short and flew back home. As his plane touched down and his limousine weaved through the city streets, he rehearsed what he might say if the woman was still there. Would she even be grateful? Or had she taken advantage of his generosity, leaving behind a trail of chaos in his meticulously organized home. The car pulled into the underground parking of his luxury building, and Gerald stepped out. His heart pounded as he rode the elevator to his penthouse on the 32nd floor. The familiar ding of the elevator doors opening felt louder than usual. He stepped inside, expecting he wasn't sure what. Perhaps mess? Maybe theft. But what he found stopped him in his tracks. The penthouse, typically immaculate, was transformed. The living room, once a cold display of modern art and expensive furniture, now radiated warmth. Toys were neatly arranged in a corner, and a stack of folded baby clothes sat on the glass coffee table. The faint scent of lavender lingered in the air. And then he saw her, the woman, standing by the window, holding her baby. She turned at the sound of his footsteps, her face flushed with surprise and fear. I didn't think you'd be back so soon," she stammered, clutching the baby closer. Gerald's gaze softened. The baby looked healthier, her cheeks pink and her tiny eyes more alert. "You stayed," he said, his voice unreadable. The woman nodded, swallowing hard. I didn't have anywhere else to go. But I swear, I didn't touch anything I didn't need. I cleaned, I cooked. I wanted to show you I'm not just taking advantage." Gerald walked past her, inspecting the changes. His usually cold, lifeless home felt alive for the first time. "You did all this?" he asked, motioning to the neatly organized space. "Yes," she said quickly. "It's the least I could do. Your kindness saved my baby's life. She had a fever when we got here, but the food, the warmth, it was enough to bring her back. I owe you everything." For the first time in years, Gerald felt a lump rise in his throat. He had expected chaos or ingratitude, not this. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone softening. "Emily," she replied. "And this is Grace." He nodded, his mind swirling. "Emily, I'm glad Grace is doing better, but why didn't you take the keys and leave? Most people would have." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Because no one's ever trusted me like this before. I've been invisible to the world for so long. You didn't just give me a roof. You gave me dignity. I couldn't betray that." Gerald's chest tightened. For years, his wealth had shielded him from the raw struggles of life. But here, in his own home, was a living reminder of what compassion could do. Still, a question loomed in his mind, and it unsettled him deeply. Was his act of generosity truly selfless? Or was he, in some way, seeking redemption for the years he had spent ignoring the plight of others? Before he could ask, Emily spoke again. "I'll leave tomorrow. I don't want to overstay my welcome." But as Gerald looked at the baby cooing in her arms, he knew he wasn't ready to let them go. Not yet. Something greater than himself was unfolding, though he couldn't quite see where it would lead. The following morning, Gerald awoke earlier than usual. He was restless, unsure of how to approach Emily's plan to leave. A part of him wanted to let her go. It would be simpler, cleaner. But another part, a deeper, unfamiliar part, felt compelled to intervene. As he entered the living room, he found Emily carefully packing a small bag. Grace lay on a blanket nearby, giggling at the sunlight streaming through the windows. The sight tugged at something in Gerald he hadn't felt in years: tenderness. "You're leaving?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Emily paused, looking up nervously. "I don't want to be a burden. You've done more than enough." Gerald walked over to the couch and sat down. "Where will you go?" Emily hesitated. "There's a shelter downtown. They might have room for us now that Grace is doing better." Her words struck him like a blow. The idea of her and the baby returning to the streets, battling the cold and uncertainty, felt unbearable. Yet he couldn't shake his instinct to be practical. A shelter is temporary. What happens after that? Do you have any other plans? Emily lowered her gaze. I used to dream about being a teacher, but dreams don't pay the bills. Gerald's mind raced. He was a man of solutions, of action. He'd built skyscrapers, orchestrated multi-million-dollar deals. Surely he could help one woman and her child find stability. What if I helped you get back on your feet? Emily looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. What do you mean? I mean, Gerald began, his voice firm, what if I invested in you? Helped you get a place to live, childcare for Grace, maybe even education so you can become that teacher you wanted to be? Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she shook her head. I can't accept that. You've already done so much. It wouldn't be right. Gerald leaned forward, his tone softening. Emily, do you know why I gave you those keys that day? She shook her head. Because someone did something similar for my mother when I was a boy. We were homeless too. A stranger gave us a chance, and it changed everything. I'm here today because of that kindness. Now it's my turn. Emily's hands trembled as she wiped her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, Gerald said with a faint smile. But there's one condition. What's that? You have to promise to believe in yourself as much as I believe in you. Deal? Emily laughed through her tears. Deal. Over the next few weeks, Gerald threw himself into helping Emily and Grace as if it were a business project. He secured a modest apartment for them in a safe neighborhood, arranged for Grace to receive proper medical care, and even paid for Emily to enroll in evening classes to earn her teaching credentials. For the first time in years, Gerald found himself spending less time in boardrooms and more time visiting Emily and Grace. They began to feel like family, a feeling he hadn't known since losing his mother. One evening, as Emily prepared dinner in her new kitchen, Gerald sat on the floor playing with Grace. The baby reached out and grabbed his finger, giggling. His heart swelled, and he realized something profound. Wealth wasn't measured by money or possessions, but by the lives you touched and the love you shared. As he watched Emily hum a tune while stirring a pot of soup, Gerald felt a peace he hadn't known in decades. Yet a part of him wondered, would his gesture truly lead to lasting change for Emily and Grace? Or was this just a fleeting moment of hope? The answer, he would soon discover, lay in Emily's strength and in the bond they were building together. Months turned into a year, and Gerald watched in awe as Emily transformed before his eyes. Gone was the timid, rain-soaked woman he had met on the street. In her place stood a confident, determined individual who carried herself with pride. Emily graduated with honors from her teacher training program and secured a position at a local elementary school. She poured her heart into her work, becoming a beacon of hope for children who came from difficult backgrounds, children who reminded her of herself and Grace. Grace, too, blossomed. Her once frail body grew strong, her laughter filling the small apartment Gerald had rented for them. On weekends, she would visit Gerald's penthouse with Emily, where she called him Uncle Gerald, and played with toys he had bought just for her. One evening, Gerald hosted a small gathering to celebrate Emily's first year as a teacher. Friends, colleagues, and even some of her students attended, their faces glowing with admiration. Emily stood at the front of the room, holding Grace in one arm and a handwritten speech in the other. "I want to thank all of you for believing in me," Emily began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But there's one person here tonight who changed my life in ways I can never fully express." She turned to Gerald, tears shining in her eyes. "You didn't just give me a home that day. You gave me hope. And with that hope, you gave me the courage to rebuild my life for myself and for Grace." The room erupted in applause, and Gerald felt a lump rise in his throat. For so long, he had measured success by the size of his bank account or the deals he closed. Now he realized his greatest achievement wasn't in the world of business. It was in the lives he had touched. After the party, Emily handed Gerald an envelope. "This is for you," she said, smiling. Inside was a photograph of Grace holding a handmade card. The card read, "Thank you for saving my mommy and me. We love you, Uncle Gerald." Beneath it were small, scribbled drawings of stars. Gerald chuckled, his heart brimming with warmth. "This is going on my wall," he said, holding up the photo. That night, as he sat alone in his penthouse, Gerald looked out at the city lights and thought about the impact of one simple act of kindness. He had given Emily and Grace a chance, but they had given him something far greater, a sense of purpose and a connection to humanity he had long forgotten. And so, the ripple of kindness continued, proving that even in the darkest moments, a single act of compassion could spark an extraordinary chain of events. If this story moved you as much as it moved us, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories of Brilliance for more inspiring tales of hope, transformation, and the power of the human spirit.